the class today is Rabbi Sachs is talking about leaders, and he says that leaders lead and they follow different than what most people follow. What they follow is they follow their inner voice. They follow their own vision, and they think outside the box, and they march to a different tune. Most people conform to others, and they do things because other people are doing them. And a real leader is someone who doesn't conform to other people, but instead a real leader is someone who has their own view of what to do, and they're not embarrassed and they're not afraid to take the lead, even though it's different than everyone else. Never was this more dramatically signaled than in the first words of Hashem to Abraham. The words that set Jewish history in motion: leave your land, your birthplace, and your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you. Why? Because people do conform. They adopt the standards and absorb the culture of the time and place in which they live, which refers to when God told Abraham to leave your land, he was referring to leave the culture where you live. When he said your birthplace, he's referring to the influences of your friends and your neighbors. When he says leave your father's house, he's referring to your family, your parents, the family with which you grew up, that you should leave all of these behind. If you want to be a leader, you have to leave these behind, and you have to be willing to take your own steps and make your own ideas in how you want to lead. I want you, says Hashem to Abraham, to be different, not for the sake of being different, but for the sake of starting something new. A religion that will not worship power and the symbols of power. For that is what the idols really were and are. So Hashem is telling Abraham, I want you to teach your children and your household afterwards to follow the way of Hashem by doing what is right and just. So the way Rabbi Sachs sees this is that what it's saying is to follow this new way Hashem wants is to leave everything behind, leave behind the religions who worship power, and I want you to follow a whole different reference point, and that is doing what is right and what is just, and not conforming to what everyone else is doing. And that is the way Rabbi Sachs is understanding the first words of Hashem to Abraham, that he's really telling him a major statement. It's not just that he should leave and go to Israel, but he's really telling him that he's got to leave all the assumptions that he has from the past, all the understandings that he has, and he should leave them and start thinking out of the box, start thinking on his own, start being a man and making decisions, making his own opinions, not
Rabbi
following
Smith,
others. Yes.
Can you mute everybody, because there's a lot of background noise?
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay. please don't unmute yourself unless you have a question. And if you have a question, you're welcome to ask. You can ask as many questions as you wish until people start complaining. So the statement Hashem told Abraham is, it is interesting that Hashem told him all these terminology to leave your birthplace, your land, your birthplace, your father's house. He could have just told him, go to Israel. And so Rabbi Sachs is drawing on these different terms, and he's explaining that it refers to the different outside sources of opinions, of views, and that he should leave all of those, whether it's friends, neighbors, culture, family, and he should leave all of that and lead a new religion that doesn't follow the way everyone else thinks, and that is the ideas of the world, which is sort of the idol worship of the day. In those days, in the previous days, it was a physical idol, but these days it would be the current idol worship, and he'll soon say what that is. To be a Jew is to be willing to challenge the prevailing consensus. And as so often happens, nations slip into worshiping the old gods. They did so in Europe throughout the 19th and early 20th century. That was the age of nationalism, the pursuit of power in the name of the nation state that led to 2 world wars, tens of millions of deaths. It is the age we are living in now, with North Korea acquiring and Iran pursuing nuclear weapons so that they can impose their ambitions by force. It is what is happening today throughout much of the Middle East and Africa, as nations descend into violence and into what's called the war of every man against every man. So this is the idol worship that, we talk about idol worship in the past, but and we don't think it's so prevalent now. But really, there is an element of idol worship that is prevalent, and that is the idol worship of power. And that idea is not always power for the individual, even the nation power, feeling, people in charge, people in government. Power is something that everyone, that's what's the current idol worship. Everyone wants it as an individual, and every nations want it as just like we see with Iran and North Korea, and they want to impose their ideals and their way of life onto the world, onto everyone else. And this is the idol worship of today. We make a mistake when we think of idols in terms of their physical appearance, of statues and icons. In that sense, they belong to the ancient times that we have long outgrown. The way to think of idols in terms of what they represent, the way to think of idols is in terms of what they represent. They symbolize power. And he goes through the names of the idols. Ra was for the Egyptians, Baal for the Canaanites, Chemosh was for the Moabites, Zeus for the Greeks, missiles and bombs for terrorists and rogue states today. Power allows us to rule over others without their consent. And one of the Greek historians said, the strong do what they wish, and the weak suffer what they must. So that is the idol worship of today. Today currently we do have idol worship. And this is what Judaism is Hashem tells us don't worship idols. Basically, what Hashem is telling us is that we shouldn't conform to the way the world is and what they're worshiping now. Judaism is a sustained critique of power. That is the conclusion that Rabbi Sachs writes, I have reached after a lifetime of studying our sacred texts. It is about how a nation can be formed on the basis of shared commitment and collective responsibility. So the idea of Judaism is not at all about power. It is about how to construct a society that honors the human person as the image and likeness of Hashem. It is about a vision never fully realized but never abandoned of a world based on justice and compassion. And based on the verse in Isaiah, it says, they will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem as the waters cover the sea. So that is what Hashem's vision is of what we're supposed to create, a nation that a society that honors every person, respects every person as someone created in the image of Hashem, Selem Elokim, and justice and compassion. No destruction, no evil. And so Abraham is without a doubt the most influential person who ever lived. Today, he is claimed as the spiritual ancestor of 2.3 billion Christians, 1.8 billion Muslims, and 14 million Jews. More than half of the people alive today. So everyone seems to think, or majority of people seem to think, that Abraham is their ancestor. And yet he ruled no empire. He commanded no great army. He performed no miracles, and he proclaimed no prophecy. He is the supreme example in all of history of influence without power. And so this is the parsha where we begin, where we speak completely about Abraham. Last week's parsha, in the last week's portion, he was born. But this week is when we talk about his first relationship with Hashem. Hashem asked him to leave his birthplace and to go to Israel. So here is where we see Hashem is sort of giving him his ultimate mission, which is going to be to lead, to influence the Jewish people, or influence everyone really. In his day and age, he was a major influencer of the world around him, not necessarily to convert the people to Judaism, but at least to encourage them to believe in one God. And that is that is one of the main commandments of the 7 Noahide laws. So Abraham tried to encourage all the people in the world to believe in God and acknowledge that all the idols are false. And we all know the story of how when Abraham was a young child, his father had an idol store. His father would sell idols. And one day his father, I guess, had some errand, and he asked Abraham if he could take over the store. So when he left, Abraham smashed all the idols, and he placed the hammer in the hand of the large idol. and or the largest idol. And when his father came back, he was shocked and angry. His whole business was now ruined. And he asked Abraham what happened. And Abraham said that the idol, the big idol, smashed all the other idols. So the father said, "What are you talking about? Idols can't do anything." So Abraham said, "If they can't do anything, how could you sell them to people and trick people as if these idols work? If idols don't work, how can we be selling them?" And so that was Abraham's claim, that we have to get the world away from worshiping these false idols. And so Abraham tried to get everyone to worship Hashem. And here is where Abraham is being told by Hashem to go into the land of Israel, and he's given his first mission from Hashem. And so Rabbi Sachs sees this as a mission of leadership, where Hashem is really telling him that you have to be what a real leader is, and that means that you have to think differently than everyone else. You have to change your whole attitude should be nothing based on what other people think. It should be totally, something different. And what that is number one, people are created in the Tselem Elokim, in the image of God. And additionally, what we find Abraham, it says clearly that that Hashem said that the reason why he loves Abraham is because Abraham is going to teach his children and his household afterwards to follow the way of Hashem by doing what is right and just. Ki yitzaveh es banav acharav. He's going to he's going to teach everyone, his children after him, to follow to follow Hashem and to do what is right and just. So that is what this nation is going to be, a nation of the Jewish nation that Hashem is now creating, beginning with Abraham, is to be this person. So Abraham is this leader that really doesn't have much power. He's a leader, an influence without power. Now, why? Because he was prepared to be different. As the sages say, he's called ha'ivri. Now, what does ha'ivri mean? Ha'ivri means that he was from the other side. And that's literally what the word means, aver. But what does it mean he's from the other side? It means that he is on one side of the world and everyone else is on the other side of the world. That means that he really took a major stand because he had to fight an uphill battle against the tide and against everyone. Like the whole world was against him. And leadership, as every leader knows, can be lonely. But you cannot just give up. You have to continue to do what you have to, because you know that the majority is not always right, and conventional wisdom is not always wise. And then Rabbi Sachs says a cute line. He says, "Dead fish go with the flow. Live fish swim against the current." And so it is with conscience and courage. So it is with the children of Abraham. They are prepared to challenge the idols of the age. And so this is a very interesting point that Rabbi Sachs brings about leadership and about how a leader really has to not even think about the majority. He has to do what's right. That's a very interesting thing, because many leaders, they claim they want to follow what the majority of their constituents would like. And what Rabbi Sachs is saying is, just because the majority thinks one way, it doesn't mean that that's the right the right way to do things. And you as a leader have an obligation, to take that stand and do what is right. What you see is the way to success and to accomplish your goal. And it's obviously a very tough thing to do because you have the majority of people against you. You're going to have quite a tough job ahead of you. But that's what real leadership is. And now Rabbi Sachs jumps to the Holocaust. And Rabbi Sachs brings, he says, after the Holocaust, some social scientists were haunted by the question of why so many people were prepared, whether by active participation or silent consent, to go along with a regime that was committing one of the great crimes against humanity. So they couldn't figure it out. How could it be? How could so many people go along with it? And one key experiment was conducted by Solomon Asch. He assembled a group of people and he asked them to perform a series of simple cognitive tasks. They were shown 2 cards. One had a line on it, and the other had 3 lines with different lengths. And he asked which was the same size as the line on the first card. So all he wanted them to do was clarify which card was the, which line on the second card was similar to the line on the first card in length. And what he didn't tell everyone was that out of all the people that were there, all of them were told what to answer. And they were told to answer the wrong answer. And there was only one person who was not told anything. And so everyone else was told what to answer, and to answer the wrong answer. And they wanted to see what would the individual that wasn't told anything, what would he do? And unbeknownst to one participant, all the others had been briefed to give the answer. They gave a correct answer on the first few cards, and then they answered incorrectly for most of the rest. And that was what he had told them in advance. And on a significant number of occasions, the subject, the experimental subject, the guy who wasn't briefed in advance, he gave the answer that he could see was the wrong answer, but everyone else gave that same answer, so he followed suit. Such is the power of pressure to conform. It was so clear that it was wrong, and yet the person just automatically answered the same answer that everyone else did. It can lead us to say what we know is untrue. More frightening still was a Stanford experiment. And this was carried out in the early 1970s by Philip Zimbardo. The participants were randomly assigned roles as guards or prisoners in a mock prison. Within days, the students cast as guards were behaving abusively, some of them subjecting the prisoners to psychological torture. And the students cast as prisoners, put up with this passively. And they even sided with the guards against those who resisted. The experiment was called off after 6 days, by which time even Zimbardo had found himself drawn into the artificial reality he had created. The pressure to conform to assigned roles is strong enough to lead people into doing what they know is wrong. So these are two experiments that we see were both really show us that number one, people conform to what others are doing or saying, and number two, that people conform to their role, even if it's totally cruel and evil. They sort of get, their mind gets lost in it, and they end up following their position. And I believe also maybe they follow their ability to have power. They sort of even though this is not this wasn't a real it wasn't a real prison, and it was just a mock prison. They started feeling that feeling of ability to have power. They grabbed it, which is the common desire, I guess, of mankind, is at least in the culture, is people like to have power. So Rabbi Sachs continues. Yes.
Rabbi,
sure.
I wanted to say that as far as the Shoah goes, there were plenty of people that didn't need to conform. They hated Jews to begin with, before the war and before the whole story, especially in Ukraine and other places, maybe not so much in Germany. So they didn't have to join. They had their own actions that they were taking before the war against the Jews.
Definitely, there's no question.
The people that conformed maybe conformed even to their actions,
Right. No, you're definitely right. You're definitely correct. I should have clarified that, and maybe Rabbi Sachs should have. That definitely correct. There's many that had they didn't conform. They believed it fully, but there were individuals maybe here and there that might have, been the conformers, and that's the question. How could they have conformed? How could they have handled? How did they not feel the guilt and feel wrong with what they were doing? So,
but there were groups too. There were the Bolsheviks, there were the Khmelnytskys, there were all kind of groups that already were hating and taking pogroms and everything against the Jews.
Correct. And the question would be there as well. Among their groups, most of them, agreed full-fledged. They were all, but there must have been individuals.
They were happy to join.
Yes, some of them were very happy to join, exactly. But there must have been an individual here and an individual there, not too many.
Right. Oh yeah, many of them were just, followers.
Right. Good point. Okay. So,
Rabbi?
I think somebody wants to talk to you.
Yes, Yehuda.
Yeah. I have a problem with the first example, Solomon Ash.
Yeah.
He's saying that one person was not told. So,
Right.
But how many times did he do this experiment?
So, it sounds like it only happened once. No, it probably was done numerous times in different groups, and there was always one person that wasn't told, so every time that individual always was conforming, or almost always, many times. It was a crazy proportion of times that the person who knew it was wrong conformed to everyone else. So it probably was it was probably done in numerous groups, because otherwise it would just be one case. One example would not be a good proof. You're right. It must have been done numerous times.
Yeah, but still, even one person, even if it was numerous groups, one person that's I don't think that was an accurate test.
Well, it's almost like saying 2 and 2 is 5, and everyone is saying correct, and then it comes to the other person and he says is he going to say correct or is he going to say wrong? And in this case, he did it so many times that that person that was not told in advance also said correct. 2 and 2 equals 5, and he said correct. Imagine that was done. I mean, you see, there is some idea of conformity, that people have, even though they know it's wrong. You don't think that proves anything? Well, it seems like the scientists accepted it. I don't know. It's on the internet. I checked it out. This is it definitely was a popular. It was common knowledge. This Solomon Asch's experiment. But,
Rabbi Smith.
Yes.
So I think the point about the Holocaust was well taken, because while your experiment is a demonstration of social conforming, I think that the Holocaust also involved another variable. When people are raised and are coached from childhood that Jews are bad, Jews are Christ killers, Jews do this, Jews do that. You've got the protocols of Zion. They're primed candidates for social conforming to really violent actions. Almost like civility is just under the surface. It's just above the surface, that it could lapse into hostility at any time if you have a crisis, sort of like an economic crisis or a social crisis. At times, I'm fearful how this country is going right now, because just yesterday there were. It was on Sunday. There was a demonstration in Manhattan, and people were attacking the demonstrators. The demonstrators were Jews for Trump, and they were attacking them. Physical attacks.
They were in a caravan. They were inside cars.
I saw video of
they
people
still
being
were
attacked on the
attacked.
street, and the police were I don't blame the police, because they're running gun shy, but they were not very aggressive in trying to subdue the people that were attacking the Jews.
Right.
Rabbi, I must intercede. The police were told to back off,
I'm sorry.
just like they were with Dinkins. So let's call a spade. Germany had a 1,000-year history of the hatred of the Jews.
Okay, Loretta. Okay, so Manny, why don't you just conclude your thought? Manny?
Well, the thought is that for Holocaust perpetuators, they're primed from childhood. They were primed from childhood.
Yes.
Not unlike the non-Jewish population today.
Right. Okay. Definitely a good point. Along the lines of what Ben was saying, that they really hated the Jews, or you're saying that they were primed in advance, so there wasn't much conformity that they needed later. They already had it already. They already were taught. But there must have been an individual here and there, I think, is what Rabbi Sachs is basing his thoughts on, that maybe weren't primed, maybe they came from other countries, that maybe they didn't follow everything that they were taught, who didn't, weren't really fully primed, and yet they conformed. In any event, this is Rabbi Sachs's thought, but yeah, definitely a good point. And Rabbi Sachs continues, he says, leaders must be prepared not to follow the consensus. One of the great writers on leadership is Warren Bennis, and he writes, by the time we reach puberty, the world has shaped us to a greater extent than we realize. Our family, friends, and society in general have told us by word and example how to be, but people begin to become leaders at that moment when they decide for themselves how to be. So, in a certain sense, if we're not deciding things ourselves, then we're not going to be leaders. A leader needs to be someone who decides for himself, and we have to be taught not to follow the consensus. One reason why Jews have become, out of all proportion to their numbers, leaders in almost every sphere of human endeavor. So Rabbi Sachs says it's precisely this willingness to be different from others. Throughout the centuries, Jews have been the most striking example of a group that refused to assimilate to the dominant culture or convert to the dominant faith. So Rabbi Sachs feels that the reason why we are leaders in all businesses, all areas, you know, in every field, medicine, law, financial, you know, basically accounting, you know, stocks, in all fields, in the banks. Jews have always shown certain elements of leadership, certain success in being leaders. And the reason, he says, he feels, is because we have the willingness to be different. And we have always taken that willingness to be different when it came to culture and faith. And what he seems to be saying is that we've been able to take that strength and use it when it comes to other fields as well. And therefore, we've been able to become leaders. So that's an interesting thought. You know, that it comes from that ability to not assimilate, that strength that we have to not assimilate, and which definitely is you know is an interesting idea. But it would seem, according to that the less assimilation a Jew has, the more he should be successful in being a leader, which would sound like the Orthodox should be more successful than maybe the Reconstructionists, you know, or in a certain sense. And I don't know if that's 100% true, but we definitely have, he's definitely right that Jewish people are, you know, way beyond proportion, have shown leadership in every field. I mean, in literature as well, and in psychology, and all fields. You know, we have shown great leadership and success. But I guess the question is, what really is the source of that? Besides, of course, the blessing from God. But is there something, you know, a natural vessel that we've been using in order to be able to express this, you know, the success, to be able to develop that success? And of course, God's blessing is what has made the success. But is there a vessel that we've been using? Is it really the fact that we've been so strong on not assimilating and to either the culture or the religion, you know, of the present religion? Like, is that? I mean, that's what Rabbi Sachs wants to believe. You know, I guess there's definitely some truth to that. We have a certain strength, I guess, that allows us to think differently than others. Well, one other finding. Does anyone want to share their thoughts on that idea? That you know, is it the ability that we don't assimilate? Is that really what, you know, what helps us succeed? Any thoughts on that?
Well, there's it's been told over and over again that what keeps the Jews together was, as in Egypt, they kept their language, they kept the style of clothing they wear, and I think there's a third thing, I can't remember it right now. You would have heard of this. What kept the Jews from assimilating? They could at least more easily avoid assimilation by keeping their language, keeping their style.
Their names and their names, their language, and their clothing.
Ah, names, right? I forgot the third one. Yes.
I think it's also the Jews are the most studious. They always appreciate studying and like to study. And so they learn a lot of things, and they can put things together, and then they're successful.
Right.
In whatever field they're in.
Okay. May I add something to that?
Sure.
Okay. Yes, Jews are more studious, and one reason I believe that Jews excel in every field out of proportion to our numbers is that we put such an extremely high value on education. My Zeta used to say, what you put in your head, the Tsar cannot steal. So physical things, your jewels, your money, whatever, the Tsar can steal it. But what you put in your head, the Tsar can never steal it from you. And I grew up with this, with my mother's milk, so to speak, you know, the importance of knowledge.
Great line, Gloria. Thank you.
I have
The Rabbi said the same thing.
He'll come back.
Yeah, hi.
Good point, Ben. Yeah. Okay, who was
I'm next.
The Rabbi said the same thing when he was arrested in jail. When he was in jail, he said, one thing they cannot take from me is what I have in my head.
Who said that? The
And they
Rebbe?
would ask him questions, you know. He said, why aren't you answering, you know?
Okay, yes. I think Jerry, you wanted to say something. Jerry?
Yes. Isn't there a Chabad teaching says we have to live in the world? Or maybe they're not the only ones that say it. We have to live in the world, even though now that presents a challenge to not do what the Joneses do. Not feeling that we have to, well, they do X, so we have to do X. So then my question would be, what does it mean that we have to live in the world?
So you're asking about conforming to society. What, you know, how does that fit with, and not conforming, as Rabbi Sachs is telling us, the great quality. So how does that fit with the idea of, you know, living a physical life and not a spiritual? We're not supposed to live as, you know, as angels live. We're actually supposed to be human. We're supposed to eat. We're supposed to sleep. We're supposed to make a living. We're supposed to, but you know, what it really means is that we're not, doesn't have anything to do with taking the culture of the world around us. What it does mean is to not break the physical, our physical body, and to live, you know, a normal life by refining and elevating everything that we come in contact with. But you know, it's not about assimilating. So you know, it's about you know, living a normal life, but obviously not following the. But it's a good point, Jerry, because you know what you're asking is, you know, maybe we shouldn't be you know, living in a mansion because everyone else is living in a mansion. You know, that's what everyone wants is wealth. And maybe, you know, maybe you're saying that, you know, that's sort of like living like everyone else. And you're asking maybe, you know, that wouldn't, you know, that's not, that's sort of like assimilating, you know, you're sort of like conforming to the desires of the world around you. And, you know, I don't see it that way. You're doing, however you're living, everything is being done for a holy purpose. So you have a big house so you can invite guests. You can have camp reunions in your house. You know, you could have events in your house for bring-ins or malava malkas. You know, people come to town. They always have a place to stay. You know that. You know, and so in a certain sense, you're not having it because of other people. You're having whatever you need. You want to do the best. So you want to live in the world. You want to connect with the physical world and the materialistic world, not because you want to conform to them, but you want to use all of these things for the right purpose. So I think that sort of clarifies.
How about a more pressing issue that's very common amongst Jews in America. The work week is Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 generally. Now, that means nobody knocks off work until 5 o'clock. Now, in New York, Shabbos, the earliest Shabbos is about 4:10, 4:11. So they have to get off work, say about 2 o'clock in order to get home in time for Shabbos in New York. some of our co-religionists or non-religious co-religionists will tell you, well, this is the state of our being today here in America. You have to conform. You have to conform to the protocol of the work week, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and that's when you knock off. So when you tell the boss that you got to get off at 2 o'clock, that requires a major change, a major diversion from the usual protocol. This was a big issue back around the turn of the century.
Okay. So
the 1920s, when the first Jews came to this country. Some of them held 52 jobs.
Right. Exactly.
During the first 1 or 2 years, 52 jobs. You know, when they didn't come in on Saturday, when
they were fired.
Monday.
Okay. So you're asking. So your question is.
So what do we do about that?
I
will admit it has gotten easier, but.
So you're asking about. I mean, number one, you're saying that we actually, many Jews did not assimilate and conform. They actually lost their job. So you're actually proving Rabbi Sachs's point, even though they were risking their position numerous times and many times they lost it. Ultimately, most of them, from my understanding, they ended up having to work for themselves, either by peddling or doing other types of work where they had their own little business, because working for other people, they always got stuck in these problems, which possibly was very beneficial, because when you work for yourself, you could actually make extra money. And when you work for others, they sort of limit your the amount that they want to pay you.
When you work for others, you're actually a slave. Yes. When you work for others, you're actually a slave.
So in any event, that's a good point, because I think what you're saying is the truth is that you're proving this idea that we really risked our lives, our livelihoods, in order to follow Hashem, and we didn't conform to what the common thing is. Okay, thank you. So anyway, let's conclude with Rabbi Sachs's conclusion here. The pressure to conform to assigned roles. I'm going to mute everyone. The pressure to conform to assigned roles is strong enough to lead people into doing what they know is wrong. That is why Abraham, at the start of his mission, was told, leave your land, your birthplace, and your father's house, to free him from the pressure to conform. Leaders must be prepared not to follow the consensus. One of the great writers, we read that, okay. One reason why Jews, one other finding of Solomon Asch is worth noting. He noted that when just one other person was willing to support the individual who could see that the others were giving the wrong answer, it gave him the strength to stand up against the consensus. So all you really need is one additional person to say the truth, and then it makes it a lot easier for you to not conform and to tell the truth. So in other words, people like to conform, but as long as there's one person who's not conforming, then it does make it a lot easier. He says that is why, however small numbers, the Jews always created or often created communities, and it is hard to lead alone, but it's much easier to lead in the company of others, even if you are in the minority, but at least you have others that are doing like you. So that's why it's always, Jews like to always live next to other Jewish people. Now, Judaism is the counter voice in the conversation of humankind, As Jews, we do not follow the majority merely because it is the majority. In age after age, century after century, Jews were prepared to do what the poet Robert Frost immortalized. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. It is what makes a nation of leaders. So that is Rabbi Sachs's essay on the Parsha. And I guess, you know, what he's really taking apart is the first words on the Parsha, and trying to explain that Abraham is what Hashem is really doing, is making Abraham into a leader. And he's saying, if you want to be a leader, you have to follow these 3 steps, and that is to remove yourself from the culture you live in, from the neighbors and friends, and from your family. So even if your family, follows one way of thinking, you have to be an independent thinker, an independent decision maker, and not conform to what others have told you, or what others think, or what the world thinks, or even what the majority thinks. And I think that really is a huge point. The majority should not really sway you, and in a certain sense, I guess that's pretty obvious, because the culture is generally the majority, and if we're telling you not to follow culture and not to follow the majority, it's pretty obvious. And so that is the message of Rabbi Sachs, and he takes it to the extent that that's really what gives us our success, is that we have that strength to not conform, and most people don't have that strength. We have a special, unique ability to be our own people, and that we inherit it sort of, I guess, from Abraham, that we can be our own thinkers, and we're not afraid of doing different than the other people. Okay, any thoughts on this?